Having a super fantastic sparkling day. Welcome to Porchlight Letters podcast number 2495, when family history becomes human history. And my apologies for being over an hour late. I kind of fell asleep in my recliner for a little bit. For me, it's a Sunday. It's Monday. It's actually Monday here today, which is King's birthday in New Zealand. The first Monday of June it used to be Queen's birthday, but when the Queen passed away, it became King's birthday. And this is actually the first King's birthday I have had a chance to observe, because in the States they don't celebrate King's birthday. And so he's been king now for 3 or 4 years. And this is the first time I've ever celebrated King's birthday. My entire life, it has always been Queen's birthday, until, of course, the Queen passed. So yeah, it's been a nice quiet day. Mum and Dad came over this morning, and Mum did some weeding in the garden. Dad did some little chores around the house. I got in and I have opened the last box. I have not unpacked the last box. There's still a lot of boxes to be unpacked, but I got to the point where I had to get going through them. I was looking for stuff specifically, and so we opened the boxes, saw what was inside, relabeled the boxes, to show what the correct items were that were inside the side, because we had 109 boxes that said books. Out of that 109 boxes, there was probably about 40 odd that were actually books. The rest might have had 1 or 2 books in there, but were other stuff. And so I got this. The last box was this big, tall box, about 30 to 36 inches in height. And it was heavy, and so I couldn't move it out from where it was. And so I opened it up where it was, and I'm just pulling out a bit of this and a bit of that. And I'm like, well, this was in our bedroom. This is from the pantry. This was on the dining table. There was stuff from everywhere in the house in there. And I'm like, I'm just going to keep going. Somebody just said, keep going, keep going, keep going. And at the very bottom were all my cookbooks, which I had. Actually, no, also in that same box was my box of clothes pegs for the clothesline that my mum had actually brought over from New Zealand to me when I was living in the RV, and had it in a plastic container. And I've been looking for those forever, and I found those in there. And I thought, right, we're in the right track, and maybe we'll get to my cookbooks. And so I kept digging. And there were my cookbooks all at the bottom. So I now have all of my cookbooks. So I was super excited. My 2 things I had to find I actually got 3 things to find: pegs, and the cookbooks are now crossed off the list. The last one left on there is my portable speakers. I have these really 2 different makes of portable speakers that hook up to my phones and stuff, and my laptop and my computer via Bluetooth, and I can't find them. So I'm still looking for those. So they could be in one of the boxes where I just opened it up and went, yeah. And I dived into it a little bit and then went, yeah, no. And so I put to sort on the outside. So I have some boxes to sort. But it was a good morning's work. A lot of stuff got done. And then after they left, I sat in my recliner for a little bit, because I had to respond to some emails and some text messages and WhatsApp messages, and then fell asleep. So I apologize. Anyway, so today we are talking about a really cool topic, which I absolutely love. It's one of the reasons why I tell people you need to learn your history. And why do you need to learn history? You need to learn history because the deeper you dig into family history, the more human history becomes. Your ancestors lived in real times, faced real challenges, made real choices, loved, hoped, worked, preserved, and helped shape the world we live in today. Behind every name in your family tree is a story that connects to something much bigger. Their story is part of our history. Our history is part of the world. Every record is a window into the past. Wars and peace, immigrations and journeys, hard work and daily life, commitments and traditions, triumphs and struggles, innovations and change. These are the moments that help shape them and us. When we understand their world, we understand ourselves a little better. Hang on, I'm just trying to, I think that was a really cool picture. Dig deep, ask questions, follow clues, honor the stories. Become family history, because family history is human history. At first, genealogy often feels personal. You start by searching names, dates, and photographs and family stories connected to your own relatives. And you always start with what you know. So you're starting with the most recent, and then you start working back one generation at a time. But the deeper you dig into family history, the more you begin to understand history itself. Suddenly, world events stop feeling distant. Wars become personal because your ancestors lived through them or fought through them. Immigration becomes personal because your family crossed oceans and borders or cultures in search of a different life. Economic hardships become personal because you see how families survive difficult times with very little. Historical records stop being old documents. They become evidence of real people navigating real lives. Genealogy reminds us that history was not experienced by famous names in textbooks alone. It was experienced by ordinary people like farmers, laborers, miners, mothers, fathers, immigrants, soldiers, children, communities trying to build a life, church families, storekeepers. You think of all those trades that were out there. The deeper we research, the more we realize that human history is really a collection of individual family stories woven together across generations. And somewhere within that larger story is our own story. So this is why I always say that it is good to learn about historical events, especially events that took place during your ancestors' lifetime. This is why going to something like newspapers.com and having a look to see what the latest news, what the news was during that time. Were any of your ancestors involved in that news item? They may have been, they may not have been. But you're starting to learn, because when you start tying pieces of history to your ancestors and even visiting, this is another big one, visiting the places that they fought in a war, where they used to live, where they were born, where they were raised, visiting these towns and cities and things where they were born and raised, kind of following in the footsteps of your ancestors, you get a better understanding of who these people are. And all of a sudden, history is just not something you read in books. History becomes personal to us because we finally understand what our ancestors went through for us to be here today. So take that with you. Go learn some history. I have a few history books on my bookcase behind me that I absolutely love, and they're books that involve events around my ancestors. So there's some World War II books about where some of my ancestors fought in World War II. I've got, I think I have a World War I book back there as well. That might still be in the garage. But I have a lot of history books because I want to understand what the conditions were at that time for those people that were my ancestors and what they had to live through. I will tell you, it is a very eye-opening experience when you look at it from what were my ancestors going through at this time. And you start reading about an incident that took place that your ancestor may have had an involvement with, may have witnessed, may have heard about. It's like when Queen Elizabeth II passed and we're getting ready for King Charles III's coronation. I said to my mum, because my mum was alive when Queen Elizabeth was coronated. And I said, what do you remember of her coronation? And my mum would have been about 10 at the time. And she says, we don't really remember much at that time because we didn't have televisions. We just sat around the radio and listened to what was going on. She said it didn't really have a lot of impact on us. We heard that King George had passed away and that she was now the queen. And then when it came to her coronation, we didn't get to see it or anything. We just sat around the radio and listened to what was going on. And that was her memories of that time. She doesn't remember a lot of it, but that's what she does remember. So it was kind of cool that the Queen's coronation now came alive for me because my parents witnessed it in some way. They may have been sitting around the radio listening, as most families used to sit around the radio in the evenings and listen to what the latest news was, what the latest events were, and that sort of thing. But then fast forward to World War II. Actually, no, rewind back to World War II. My grandfather and his brothers, my grandmother and her brothers were all involved in some way in World War II. My great-grandfather, who was my paternal grandfather's father, he was involved in World War II as well, and he had also been involved in World War I. And in World War II, he stayed in New Zealand, and he was the captain at Fort Balance in Wellington. The fort no longer exists. There are bits and pieces at that area that are still there that you can go and have a look at and that sort of stuff. But now I'm more interested in learning about that time and what it was like in New Zealand during World War II. And in my sewing kit, and I found my sewing kit today too in a box. I did not take it out. I should have, because in there is actually a newspaper article that my grandmother, my paternal grandmother, cut out. And somehow, I don't know how, but I ended up with this newspaper article from during World War II about a Japanese submarine off the coast of New Zealand. So I'm going to find that for you and bring that. And that became a little more personal because my family was basically in New Zealand at that point. All my ancestors were now here in New Zealand. And so that became sort of a thing. What happened if that had landed, if it had attacked New Zealand? It starts raising these questions. What would their life have been like? But I don't have to worry about the what ifs, because I know, well, I kind of do have to worry about the what ifs at times, because there's times that the newspaper stories or the historical books and stuff don't exactly cover exactly what life was like. It may give you an idea of what life was like, and some will give you more of a overall look. So it doesn't tell you specifically what their life was like during that time, but learn the history of the time periods that your ancestors lived through. If they were based in England during World War II, what was their life like at that time? If they were in America during World War II, what was their life like during that time? If they left America to go over to Europe to fight, what was it like for them? Or if they went to the Pacific, the campaigns going on in the Pacific Ocean, what was it like for them? What was it like for those left at home? What was it like for those that had left to go and fight? What was it like? We've got 6th of June coming up very shortly. And that is just one day that absolutely astounds me. This was June 6, 1944, when I haven't found any connections in my family tree of people that were involved with D-Day at Normandy, the landings at Normandy. But when you read the statistics of how many aircraft, boats, ships, troops, paratroopers, or the whole logistics of this invasion, it just blows my mind. They didn't have computers back then. Everything was done over radio with courier runners going backwards and forwards with messages and stuff. And it just blows my mind of the number of people that were involved in the operation of the landing at Normandy. I just can't wrap my head around it. There were so many people involved in D-Day. It was unbelievable, the numbers of people involved in that day. I actually have a really good map that I put up on D-Day that shows the numbers. You're talking hundreds of thousands of troops. You're talking, over 160,000 American, British, Canadian, and Allied nations stormed 5 heavily fortified beaches in Normandy, France. That's just the troops on that. You're not counting the thousands of paratroopers that were dropped in during the night when it was still dark. You're not counting the number of planes that were there, the boats, the ships that were involved with it. It was an incredible feat. And for them to keep it quiet and people not really know what was going on, that in itself was, they were hiding troops in England, waiting for the invasion to go ahead. It's just, if you ever just go read about it, if you've ever seen the movie. Okay, now I know this is Hollywoodized, but the movie The Longest Day is the one I always watch on June 6th, because it gives you a glimpse at some of the numbers involved in that invasion, and how they went about keeping it as secret as they did, and all of this sort of stuff. I haven't found any ancestors that were involved in the landings at Normandy, but it's still, the whole event just fascinates me because of the number of people involved in this thing. And that'll be going up on my Facebook page soon, as it'll go up on June 6th, because it always does. It's just mind-boggling. It really is. So there's events in the world that are like that your ancestors may have had a connection to. Did you have ancestors who landed on the beaches at Normandy, who were somehow involved in the invasion on June 6th? What was their role in it? Were they one of the radio operators that were getting the messages? Were they one of the planners that were moving the little things around on their little map board thing? Were they keeping the troops trained and isolated and hidden? The number of troops that they hid in England during that time, they had millions of troops. It was unbelievable. I'll talk about that on June 6th. So we'll talk about that more. But just what they went through with the planning, and where did they hide all the aircraft, and where did they hide all the ships? Because, the Germans are doing their flights and everything. Why did they not see all these ships that were lined up ready to invade? And there's a whole bunch of questions I have about June 6th and what happened and all the logistics behind it that I may never get answered. Maybe I need to find a good book on June 6th about that has all the statistics in it. It's just, and I'm not a statistics person, but the numbers just blow my mind. But anyway, that's it for me. Go dig into your history where, and especially if you find military in your history, go and find out what campaign, and you go to fold3.com, and it's fold3.com. If you go there, you can actually access most of the military records in the US on there, and you'll access some of the British, Canadian, Australian, and New Zealand records that are on there as well. I can't remember what other countries they have on there. They don't have all of them on there, but it's a good place to start if you're looking for somebody's military records. And some of the stuff that's in there is just absolutely heartbreaking, heart-wrenching, amazing, mind-blowing, all that sort of stuff. So start looking at your family tree. What did they do? Where were they during certain periods of time in history? And what major events were happening at that time? Did they have a role in that thing? Did they witness it? Or did they just hear about it on the news? So that is your assignment for today. I'm giving you an assignment for today. Go and experience your family history from the historic. And when you're looking at these events that your ancestors are involved in, look at it, try and look at it through their eyes, what was happening at the time, instead of just reading, oh yeah, this is history. No, put your ancestor in there. And your ancestor may even be mentioned in some of the articles or the books that have been written about that time period. So you can actually look at it from their perspective. So that's my challenge for you today. Go out, have a super fantastic, sparkling evening, and we'll catch you guys back here tomorrow evening at 6 p.m. Pacific. And I promise not to try and fall asleep in my recliner. Hey, kunara.